Every day, on a busy avenue in São Paulo, Maria Helena would walk to her makeshift cardboard shelter in front of a luxurious commercial tower. At 28 years of age, her life had been marked by a series of misfortunes that had left her destitute. Her long black hair and deep brown eyes retained a beauty that not even adversity could erase. Eduardo Monteiro, a prosperous 45-year-old businessman who owned a chain of private hospitals, always watched her from his 30th floor penthouse. Something about that woman intrigued him. Perhaps it was the dignity with which she faced her illness, or the kindness with which she treated passers-by, even when they ignored her. One autumn morning, Eduardo decided to go down and talk to Maria Helena. What began as a simple offer of help turned into an unusual proposal. He would pay her a large sum of money to give birth to his child, as he had discovered that he was sterile after years of trying to have children in his 2 previous marriages. Maria Helena, initially reticent, saw the proposal as an opportunity to start her life again. An agreement was reached. She would receive a furnished flat, full medical care and a bank account with monthly amounts for her upkeep. In exchange, she would hand over the child to him after the birth and keep the agreement completely secret. What neither of them imagined was that the agreement would change their lives in a way they could never have foreseen. During the months of pregnancy, Eduardo followed each stage closely, attending all the medical appointments and developing an increasingly close relationship with Maria Helena. He discovered that she had a degree in education, but that a series of family tragedies had left her homeless. As the months went by, Maria Helena's life changed completely. Living in a comfortable flat in the Pinheiros neighborhood, she began to regain her self-esteem and return to her old dreams. Eduardo, on the other hand, became increasingly involved not only with the pregnancy, but also with Maria Helena herself. The conflict began when Regina, Eduardo's sister and an executive in his business group, found out about the arrangement. She began to investigate Maria Helena's past, discovering that the former tramp had a complex family history. Her father had been a well-known businessman who lost everything in a corruption scandal, leading the whole family to ruin. Regina, fearing that Maria Helena was manipulating her brother to get her hands on part of his fortune, began a silent campaign to separate them. She hired private investigators and began to plant doubts in Eduardo's mind about Maria Helena's true intentions. The situation became even more complicated when the press began to speculate about the mysterious woman who was often seen with the famous businessman. The tabloids began to create conspiracy theories, and Maria Helena's past as a vagabond came to light, generating sensationalist headlines that threatened Eduardo's reputation and his hospitality empire. Maria Helena, now 6 months pregnant, began to feel the weight of the external pressures. The gossip in the corridors of the building, the crossed glances in the doctors' offices, and the constant attacks from the media began to take their toll on her emotional health. Eduardo, torn between protecting his business interests and defending Maria Helena, found himself in an ever-growing dilemma. The turning point came when Regina presented Eduardo with documents that suggested that Maria Helena had participated in her father's corruption schemes. Although the documents had been tampered with, the seed of doubt had been planted. Eduardo, under pressure from the board of directors of his hospitals, began to gradually distance himself from Maria Helena, leaving her alone at a crucial moment in her pregnancy. Eduardo's distancing deeply affected Maria Helena, who began to realize that her feelings for the businessman had gone beyond the limits of the initial agreement. In the lonely evenings in her flat, she recalled the moments when he would hold her hand during the ultrasound scans, or when they would share anecdotes at the dinners that had become a regular occurrence. Meanwhile, Eduardo immersed himself more and more in his work, trying to ignore the emptiness he felt. His secretary, Doña Carmen, a lady who had been working with him for 20 years, noticed the change in his behavior. She had witnessed her boss's positive transformation during his months with Maria Helena, and now she saw him reverting to the cold and distant man he had been before. At that moment, an important character emerged, Dr. Miguel, the obstetrician in charge of prenatal care. He had developed a relationship of trust with the couple and noticed the changes in their dynamic. Concerned for the well-being of the pregnant woman and the baby, he began to investigate the accusations against Maria Helena on his own. Regina, meanwhile, was forging links with Veronica, Eduardo's ex-wife, planning to use the scandal to force her brother to sell his shares in the hospital. The two women were plotting behind the scenes, unaware that Mrs. Carmem was silently recording all suspicious conversations. Maria Helena found unexpected support in So Jose, the building's doorman, who had experienced a similar situation on the street. He became her confidant, and realizing the sincerity in her eyes, he decided to help her clear her name. So Jose knew people who had worked with Maria Helena's father and knew that she had never been involved in any illicit scheme. The tension reached its peak when Maria Helena began to have premature contractions due to stress. Alone in her flat, she tried to contact Eduardo, but her calls were systematically blocked by Regina. It was Dona Carmem who, realizing the gravity of the situation, decided to intervene, breaking protocol and entering the meeting room where Eduardo was discussing a new acquisition for the hospital. Mrs. Carmem's abrupt entrance into the meeting room changed the course of everything. With Maria Helena in premature labor, Eduardo finally realized the extent to which he had allowed himself to be manipulated. Leaving the meeting halfway through, he ran to his apartment, finding her in a delicate state, being attended to by the SAMU. In the hospital, while Maria Helena was taken to the emergency room, Mrs. Carmem finally revealed to Eduardo the whole plan she had uncovered. She showed him the recordings of the conversations between Regina and Veronica, in which they spoke openly about how they had forged the documents against Maria Helena. The plan was to use the scandal to force Eduardo to sell his shares at a low price, which would allow Regina to gain full control of the hospitals. Dr. Miguel, who was on duty that night, confirmed his suspicions about the manipulation of the facts. He had found the former accountant of Maria Helena's father, who kept documents proving that she was a minor at the time of the events and was studying in another country on a scholarship when the fraud took place. During the tense hours of the birth, Eduardo stayed by Maria Helena's side, holding her hand and apologizing for having doubted her. It was at that critical moment that she revealed something she had been hiding. She was in love with him, but she was afraid to admit it because of the initial agreement and the social difference between them. The baby was born prematurely, but healthy. It was a boy who cried out loud when he came into the world, as if to announce his triumphant arrival. The moment Eduardo held his son in his arms for the first time, something changed in his gaze. It wasn't just the baby that had been born that day. It was a new perspective on life, a new opportunity to be happy. Meanwhile, in the hospital corridor, Sir Jose arrived with a folder of documents. He had managed to gather definitive proof of Maria Helena's innocence, including statements from former employees of his father's company confirming that she had never been involved in any illicit activity. What's more, the documents revealed that Regina had been complicit in the fraud that led to the ruin of Maria Helena's family. With the birth of little Lucas, as they called the baby, a new phase began. Eduardo, now aware of the truth, had to make difficult decisions in both his personal and professional life. The first of these was to remove Regina from all his businesses after presenting evidence of her manipulations to the hospital's board of directors. Maria Helena, still recovering from premature labor, faced her own challenges. The original agreement provided for the baby to be handed over, but her feelings had completely changed. During the long nights in the maternity ward, while she breastfed Lucas, she struggled internally with the possibility of having to be separated from him. Eduardo, realizing her silent suffering, finally dared to express his true feelings. One afternoon, while Maria Helena was breastfeeding Lucas in the hospital room, Eduardo entered with a bouquet of flowers and a proposal different to the original one. He confessed that he had fallen in love with her during the months they had been living together, and that he could no longer imagine his life without the two of them. The previous agreement was forgotten, replaced by the proposal to start a family together. The news of the relationship between the businessman and the former homeless woman made the headlines, but this time in a positive way. Maria Helena's story of overcoming adversity inspired other homeless people. Eduardo used his influence to create a foundation to help people in situations of social vulnerability, and Maria Helena took charge of the social projects. Veronica, seeing her plans fail, tried one last trick, threatening to expose Eduardo's supposed secrets. However, Donna Carmen had already gathered enough evidence of her and Regina's involvement in several fraudulent schemes. The two were finally investigated by the police and definitively removed from Eduardo's circle of influence. The process of recovering her public image was gradual. Maria Helena returned to her profession as a teacher, now coordinating educational programs for disadvantaged children through the foundation. Her past in the streets, instead of being a source of shame, became her greatest strength in the struggle for social justice. The big turning point came during the inauguration of the Montero Foundation's first shelter, a project conceived by Maria Helena and financed by Eduardo. The event brought together São Paulo's high society, the press, and above all, the homeless, people who would benefit from the project. During her opening speech, Maria Helena was surprised by the unexpected arrival of her father, Fernando Santos, whom everyone had believed to be dead. He had spent the last few years hiding in the interior of Paraná, gathering evidence to clear his name. With the documents in hand, Fernando revealed that Regina had not only participated in the fraud that destroyed his family, but that she had been the mastermind behind the whole plot. The revelation caused a great stir on the spot. Regina, who was watching it all on television, tried to flee the country when she realized that she was about to be exposed, but she was intercepted by the federal police at Guarulhos Airport. The evidence presented by Fernando was irrefutable. Documents, recordings, and bank transfers that showed how Regina had plotted the bankruptcy of the Santos company and then bought it for a derisory price. In front of all the guests, Eduardo took the stage and, with little Lucas in his arms, gave an emotional speech. He revealed how his initial prejudices had almost caused him to miss the opportunity to meet his true love, and how Maria Helena had changed not only his life, but also his view of the world. Right there, to everyone's surprise, he knelt down and asked Maria Helena to marry him. The most emotional moment, however, came when homeless people, old acquaintances of Maria Helena from difficult times, began to talk about how she had never stopped helping them, even after her life changed. They shared stories of how she distributed food, clothes, and above all, hope, always believing that everyone deserved a second chance. Fernando Santos, overcome with emotion, was finally able to embrace his daughter after years of separation. The reunion between father and daughter moved everyone present, symbolizing not only a family reconciliation, but also the correction of a historical injustice. On the eve of Eduardo and Maria Helena's wedding, a new event shook the family. Regina, despite being in prison, managed to send a revealing letter. Lucas was not Eduardo's biological son. The laboratory that carried out the insemination procedure had been bribed by her to change the samples, using genetic material from an anonymous donor. The news devastated Eduardo at first, but his reaction surprised everyone. During an intimate dinner with Maria Helena, he confessed that he had already suspected this possibility a few weeks earlier when routine tests on the baby revealed an incompatible blood type. However, he was determined. Lucas was his son, regardless of the biological TS. Maria Helena, fearing that this revelation would change Eduardo's feelings, found unexpected support in Mrs. Carmen. The secretary revealed that she had an even bigger secret. Years ago, Eduardo had frozen his genetic material before discovering his infertility. Regina had lied about the destruction of those samples, which were still being stored in a laboratory in Switzerland. The couple decided to keep the discovery of Lucas's paternity a secret. However, the investigation into Regina's actions at the laboratory eventually revealed a much larger plot involving the exchange of genetic material that affected dozens of other families. Eduardo, using his influence and resources, set up a project to help all the families affected by the plot. Fernando Santos, now socially rehabilitated, took on a key role in the foundation, using his management experience to expand the social projects. He discovered that the laboratory involved in the scam had links to an international human trafficking network, information that was crucial to the federal police investigations. The media, who had previously been cruel to Maria Helena, now portrayed her as a modern-day heroine, someone who overcame all adversity and helped others to do the same. Her story inspired a series of reports about homeless people who managed to rebuild their lives. Eduardo and Maria Helena's wedding was celebrated in an intimate ceremony in the gardens of the new headquarters of the Montero Foundation. Little Lucas, almost 1 year old, was carried in the arms of Mrs. Carmen, who had been chosen as godmother. The ceremony brought together not only high society, but also the homeless people whom Maria Helena had helped over the years. During the party, Eduardo announced the expansion of the network of shelters to 5 Brazilian capitals. The project would now include not only accommodation, but also vocational training and job placement. Maria Helena would be the executive director of the project, using her personal experience to create truly effective programs. Fernando Santos, fully rehabilitated, took over as president of the foundation's board of trustees. His management experience, combined with his daughter's social vision, transformed the institution into a model of social assistance for the whole country. Regina's case ended with her being sentenced to 15 years in prison, not only for her financial crimes, but also for her involvement in the laboratory scam. However, the real transformation took place in the couple's personal lives. Eduardo, who used to be known for his coldness in business, became a devoted father and a loving husband. Maria Helena, for her part, managed to turn her painful experience on the street into the strength necessary to help others, never forgetting her origins. Lucas grew up healthy and loved, surrounded not only by the love of his parents, but also by an extended family that included Dona Carmen, Seu Jose, and all the people who had participated in this extraordinary journey. The question of biological paternity was never raised again. Love had proven stronger than any genetic link. Eduardo's hospital empire, now managed with a more humanized approach, has become a benchmark in social care, with specific free care wards and health programs for people in vulnerable situations. The story of this couple has become a symbol of how love can transform not only 2 lives, but an entire society. 5 years have passed since Eduardo and Maria Helena were married. Little Lucas, now 6 years old, grew up to be a bright and compassionate child, always attentive to the needs of others. On Sunday mornings, he would often be seen helping his parents hand out breakfast to the homeless, a ritual the family maintained so as never to forget their origins. The Monteiro Foundation has become the largest social welfare organization in Brazil, with shelters in every state capital. Maria Helena revolutionized the social welfare system, creating a model that combined housing, education, and job opportunities. Her Second Chance program had already helped more than 10,000 people get off the streets and rebuild their lives. Eduardo expanded his network of hospitals, but with a fundamental difference. Each new unit included a wing dedicated to free, highly complex care. The humanized management model became a case study in business schools, demonstrating that it was possible to combine business success with social responsibility. Fernando Santos, now an owlish grandfather, devoted himself to giving talks on overcoming adversity and starting over. His story of redemption, together with that of his daughter, inspired an award-winning documentary about social transformation and forgiveness. Although retired, Mrs. Carmem remained a constant presence in the family's life, now as a volunteer coordinator of the foundation's educational projects. The couple had 2 more children, twins Sofia and Miguel, the result of a natural pregnancy that surprised everyone, proving that miracles do happen. Lucas was the most protective and affectionate brother that his parents could have wished for their little ones. One special afternoon, during the inauguration of the foundation's 10th shelter, Maria Helena met a young homeless woman who reminded her a lot of herself years ago. By helping her to recover, Maria Helena completed a cycle, demonstrating that sometimes we need to lose ourselves in order to find our true purpose. The story of the millionaire and the vagrant has become a symbol of hope, not only because of the love that blossomed in improbable circumstances, but because it shows that when we reach out to help someone, we can transform not only one life, but entire generations. Little Lucas grew up knowing that his existence had been the catalyst for a change that would continue to impact lives far beyond his own family. And so, what began as a business became a story of love, redemption, and social transformation, demonstrating that the greatest miracles occur when we open our hearts to the unexpected.